The Warriors are trying their best to make this a competitive roster for Steph Curry, but they're failing pretty spectacularly. Welcome in or welcome back today. Obviously, we're talking about Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and the Klay Thompson-less Golden State Warriors. Much like the Lakers, I think it's really important to have very clear, very defined roles and expectations for the upcoming season, and the only thing that we need to concern ourselves, whether we are just fans of the Warriors or fans of basketball in general, is watching Steph Curry hoop. Because that really is all this roster is going to be good for. I think there just wasn't enough activity. There wasn't enough growth from the players that they do have for me to be invested in a potential playoff run. And I don't mean by any stretch of the imagination that this is the last season of Steph Curry. This is the last time we're going to see him be super competitive, because I think, if anything, this past summer, watching him play for the Olympics, it really proved that Steph Curry still has so much left in the tank. It really is just a shame that because of that, we're not going to see that on the floor, potentially a deep playoff run. I think a lot of this season is actually just going to be figuring out how your younger pieces fit into the right now and the future. I do think they have a lot of good talent on the roster, especially for the youth aspect. Jonathan Kuminga, Pods, Trace Jackson-Davis, Moses Moody, like the list goes on. Not to mention someone like Gui Santos, who showed a lot of promise throughout the season when Klay was dealing with some injuries. I don't think that kind of roster, that kind of young core can contribute so much now because Steph Curry is at the peak of his power. And that's not to say that the young guys are the only thing that's going to help Steph Curry. They obviously still have Draymond Green, which is the hub of that defense, and he's not the defender that he once was, but he still can be very serviceable, and he still understands the rotation, and more importantly, for that particular offense, he is the thing that makes it go. Steph Curry is obviously the most explosive, the most dynamic scorer on the whole bunch, but you saw it a lot of times when Draymond Green was not on the floor. Steph Curry struggled to get open shots like he does, and that's because Draymond is such a good connector between players that's going to be utterly important again this year, especially with the additions of people like Kyle Anderson and Buddy Hield. Kyle Anderson obviously came from that Spurs system, and he's played on other great teams, not teams with great superstars, but great individual teams. Someone being able to step into that Draymond role if he is ever out with an injury or suspended, let's be honest. Someone who can step into that role and still be that connector piece is going to be super valuable to them. And if you couldn't keep Klay, getting Buddy Hield as a consolation prize is actually the best that you're ever going to do. Because we know who Buddy is. We know the kind of player that he is, what he's going to bring to a team. And if there was ever going to be a plug-and-play player to replace Klay Thompson, it's him. I would have to imagine, too, that while you are losing this defensive acumen that Klay could potentially bring, even though he wasn't the defender like he was back in the day, being able to supplement him with Buddy Hield could create a lot of problems for opposing defenses. What I actually hope to see, and I hope it's already started to work some of its magic, is these older players clinging on to the younger players and kind of molding them into good NBA basketball players. Because I would love nothing more than to see Pods and Gui Santos cling onto Buddy Hield, being able to understand how to come off of a screen and to get other people open with your gravity, being able to open up the offense for the Warriors. And people like Kyle Anderson grabbing a hold of Jonathan Kuminga, because I think that the next evolution of the Warriors, post-Draymond, post-Steph, if there is ever going to be a future with Jonathan Kuminga, it's going to be him as that connector piece like a Draymond role. Because right at this moment, he hasn't developed enough offensively to make me think that he's the next guy. He's taken tremendous steps year by year, and I don't necessarily expect that to not be the case this year. I just don't think that it's going to be such a big jump that we can very clearly go, yes, that is the guy that take us into the future. Outside of those newly acquired key players and the young players that they do have some really serviceable role players. Gary Payton's obviously a great defensive guy. He's going to be able to lock somebody up on any given night. Having someone like Kevon Looney, being a great rebounder that he is, obviously helps that Warriors offense a lot since they are undersized most times. And bringing in someone like Kevin Knox, who I know hasn't lived up to his potential or his hype throughout the years, but still could be very serviceable, kind of like a Dario Saric from a couple years ago, give you 9 or 10 points a game, 4 rebounds, a couple assists a game, just to do all the dirty work. At bare minimum, being able to eat up innings if there is a postseason run for this team. Regardless of everything that is going to happen this season, I think what we have to keep in check for the future is monitoring Steph Curry and his happiness level, because I'd have to imagine that after being in playoff run and contention for a championship for a lot of years in a row and winning 4 of them, losing your best friend in Klay Thompson to where he can go to Dallas and compete for another championship, if that happens and you also suck the next year, I'd have to imagine that there is some internal conversation at least that Steph Curry, maybe not this year, but eventually will want out. This management team, I used to think was going to keep that core three together forever. I thought they were all going to ride off into the sunset, essentially. But the fact that all the reports indicated that Klay Thompson went to Steph Curry and said, I don't want you to use any of your influence or any of your power. If they want me, they'll sign me. And they just didn't. If they're going to let Klay Thompson walk, I'm assuming they're also going to let Draymond Green walk at some point. And who's to say that they're not going to let Steph Curry walk, or at minimum trade him for something down the road if it gets bad? It does bring up an interesting question. How much draft capital, how much star power does Steph Curry garner at this stage in his career? Could you trade him to a team and get 4 or 5 first-round picks for him? That's really interesting to me. But if I'm being honest with myself, even though that is an avenue and that is a possibility, I'm not sure how likely it actually is. But what is a possibility and what is likely this year is that Steph Curry very well might average 35 and the Warriors are going to be pretty bad. Not bad from an aspect of I have bad basketball players on my team, just inexperience for a lot of my core rotation guys. But who knows? Maybe Steph Curry makes an All-NBA bid again and he drags Buddy Hield with him. Draymond Green gets another all-defensive look. Who knows? Maybe this team is actually good enough to make a run in the playoffs, but I think if we're being intellectually honest, the height of this team is probably a 6th seed. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. What do you think of the Warriors? Do you think that they're going to be in the playoffs and pretty easily in the playoffs, or do you think they're going to be toiling in the play-in rounds? Let me know down in the comments below. Check my link tree while you're at it. Join the Discord. Be kind. Tell somebody you love them. And I'll see you tomorrow.